Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. You know, every week I've got a special guest, but this week I've got another special guest, Dr. Praise. She's a big sister. She's a mom. She's a wife. She's a transplant surgeon. But for today, she's just going to be herself. She's going to be Praise. She's about to tell us more about herself outside her different roles, because sometimes we get caught up in our roles. And I am hoping by just her sharing her story, we'll be able to actually rediscover ourselves. Like, I know as a mom of three, sometimes you get caught up in even introducing yourself to say, I am Mrs. So-and-so, I am a mom of three, and you forget you are yourself at the end of the day to say, I'm actually Anna. So welcome, Praise. How are you?
Thank you. I am so glad to be doing this with you. Thank you so much for inviting me on your Candid Conversations.
It's my turn.
Yes. Be kind to me.
Yeah. So I did a podcast session with Dr. Praise, and I said to her after we're done, you also need to come on my channel. And yeah, it's such an honor to have you here and be able to have a conversation with you. So I want to start off by telling you a crazy thing about how God answered little prayers. I remember reading your story years ago and saying to myself, God, you know, can you be kind to me to allow me to be in the same space as her? And it hasn't happened once. This is the second time, so it's an honor. It just shows you those little prayers you make, actually, God listens, you know? And what I love about you is how authentic you are. That's why I was saying to myself, I'd love to be in the same space as her.
I came after you, remember, when I wanted you on my podcast.
Yeah. That's a crazy thing.
Yeah, because then that's when I realized that I actually knew you, but didn't actually realize, because you were such a baby, you know, but I knew your mom. So, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so you're like the big sis, and I'm happy because we're going to be learning a lot from you today. I want to start off by just saying I loved your story. I love how you're encouraging people, but also being honest that it's not easy to you don't wake up and you've just arrived. You actually go through something. And I work with a lot of young people, and they always struggle with the idea of you need to keep going, you need to keep going. And when I was reading your story, you were talking about how it was so hard for you when you came to a point where you lost your mom. And there's a statement I saw that said it was harder than when you had to tell your dad that I'm pregnant, you know? And I want you to tell us a little about that, to say, when you were going through your young ages, like when you were youth and everything, what kept you going in those hard times?
So honestly, you know, it's like looking back at the young years, like I think for me, my defining age was 14, because that's when I moved to the States. So, you know, before then it was like, I'm a pastor's kid, so we moved all the time. So really from the time I started first grade to the time I graduated high school, I'd gone to 7 different schools. So you learn to adapt, and you are like, you learn not to really make friends because you know that you're gonna have to leave soon, you know? Because I remember like first grade, I was at Solusi, and then we moved to Highfields after. And so it's like middle of second grade, I was at Chipembere Primary School. And so that was when we moved, it was like in June. And then it's like in December, school term ended. And then the next school year, I started at Highlands. And I was at Highlands for 3 and 4. And then it's like, I started going to Southerton Primary School. And that was like, did you really?
I was in Southerton at that time. We actually used to live in Southerton, but I used to go to Highlands. So I'm like, what?
Oh, wow. Yeah, because it's like I went to Highlands Primary. And then, you know, it's like the commute was so hard for me and my mom. I remember because my dad at the time would, you know, he was pastoring Highfield Church, Old Highfields and Highfield. But then he used to go to Helderberg College and do classes for like, I think 3 months at a time. working on, on his theological degree. And so during that time, my mom, I remember she would wake up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, get me ready for school. We would go to school, and I've never been able to eat early in the morning. So she would carry this flask with milk and cereal and would go, would have to get on so many Macombi and buses to get to Highlands. Yeah. And then she would wait for me the whole day. So that I would go to school and she would be there waiting for me. And then when I was done with school, then she should bring me back home. This is like 3rd grade, for me. I'm like, can you imagine the dedication she had? Because she wanted me to go to an Adventist school.
Wow. And and the sacrifices she was willing to make. Like, how sometimes we're always selfish to say, what about me? But she was like, for your sake, I'm going to be doing whatever it takes.
No question asked. And then I started complaining after a while. I was like, this waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning is too much, And so then they were like, okay, fine. So then they transferred me to Southerton. I was so excited. I mean, I was sad to leave my class, but I was so used to moving that it wasn't too much of a big deal. I was just excited to not have to get up so early. And, starting from Highfields, I could just get on the bus and go to school. So, and, I used to actually, a lot of times I used to use my bus money to buy extra snacks and just walk home because it wasn't that far,
Yeah.
And so after that, I was actually at Southerton for like a term. And then from then on, I had to we moved to live in Cranbourne. And so I started going to Queensdale Primary School. And so that was like the end of 5th grade and then 6th grade. And then 7th grade, I went to Anderson for boarding school. And then Form 2 is when we moved to the States. So it's like with the moving, it was like, it was, when I moved to America, it wasn't like much of an adjustment other than the cold because, we moved in December in the dead of winter to Michigan. And it was just like a rude awakening for me. But other than that, also the fact that we moved to Bering Springs, Michigan, which is so rural compared to, growing up in Harare. And so it's like, that was quite a change. But then other than that, like I was able to adapt like that. So even though it's like growing up, I always felt like, oh my gosh, it's like so hard to make friends because every time I have to move, it actually has helped me even in my life to be able to adapt in whatever situation I end up in. So that's pretty much my childhood. And then we moved to the States. Life was just, normal. It was normal, regular diaspora life. And I ended up skipping grades and ended up graduating high school at 16. And I was almost 17, actually, I think. Yeah. So I was almost 17. And then I started college. And then when I was 18, I got pregnant. So here is Pastor Matemavi's daughter.
Yeah. Tell us a little about that.
That was hard. Because I'm the kind of kid who always was very transparent. And so I never wanted to hide anything, like if I was dating somebody, I would bring them home so that the parents could see, okay, so this is my boyfriend, this is the person I'm dating or whatever. But, so in this case, it was like, whoa, so this happened. Now you have to go tell your parents that you're pregnant. And that was hard. That I feel for those girls who get pregnant when they're young and out of wedlock, and to have to experience that is hard, because just the disappointment that you see on your parents' faces, that alone, if it doesn't kill you.
You're like, oh my word. Yeah. But I want to also know in that time mentally what kept you going, because it meant like when your tummy was getting bigger, it also meant other people were asking you so many questions. what kept you going, even though you knew that your parents now understood, it still meant you had to go out there? Because I meet a lot of women who sometimes make mistakes, and it does happen. But just the fact that everyone around them knows, how can someone navigate that? I'd love to know how you did it.
So the thing is, first, let me get a little bit on my soapbox and say that I was very disappointed in the way that people in our church treated me. I'm just saying it. I was so disappointed because it's like just not only just the judgment, but it's like basically you are shunned, and the talk. I mean, people said so much bad things, just so discouraging and such horrible things. And I remember someone actually talking to me and saying, you know, a lot of girls would have chosen to have an abortion, and a lot of girls do that, but you chose to keep your baby. And I don't understand why everybody is giving you such a hard time about it. And to me, you know, it's like having an abortion was not an option for me, just based on my beliefs. And, you know, it was like, this is what has happened, you know. Now I have to figure out a way to make it work. And I am so lucky because I had parents who were very supportive. Yes, it was difficult for them because they are looking at their 18-year-old kid and they're like, this kid had all these dreams of becoming a doctor. Now, how is she ever going to be able to do that? You know, being a mom and raising a child and all these things. And for me, I think I've always just had that really strong sense of self. And I don't, yes, it was very hurtful for, you know, hearing all the things that people were saying, but I generally don't care what people think about me or say about me. And that I think is what has helped me to get to where I've gotten to for so long, because I live my life, you know. It's like that verse, yes, I do me. And whatever is good for me at that moment is the decision I'm going to make, not based on what other people are going to say. So for me, I pulled myself away from that environment. Yes, I still lived in that community of a lot of Zimbabweans, but I pulled myself from that environment, and I did not associate myself with people who were negative towards me or who had anything funny to say about me. So I completely changed and went to a different church that was in an African church, where it was very very accepting of me. And I learned very young. Yes, I learned very young at that stage that you have to put yourself in an environment that's going to help you grow. Don't keep yourself in an environment that's going to stunt your growth. You have to put yourself in environments that help you to grow. So you know what you want to do in life, you know where you need to get to, and you just have to make sure that the environment that you have is conducive for your growth, because you cannot grow when you're being stunted. You can't. It doesn't matter how hard you try. You just can't. You have to, even if it's just getting in that environment in your mind, because sometimes you can't physically remove yourself from that environment, and you have to be there, but you can remove yourself from that environment in your mind.
I love that. So, before you continue, I love that part, because you mentioned something about you actually knowing who you are, because I did a video recently on rejection, and I got a lot of young people coming back to me to say, this is the reality. Sometimes we get that rejection even in church. When you're thinking church is a hospital, I'm wanting to go before God and actually just accepting He's the one person who's forgiven me. And we find ourselves chasing those people. And she was saying it was also finding that no one wanted to accept me. But I love that you said you actually knew who you were, which is something sometimes we lack, because we are looking for validation from people who are around us. And you making that decision that I'm going to change a church, it's not stopping me from still going to God, because sometimes our standard is defined by men, and we forget, like the Pharisees in the Bible, they were lost, you know. They were actually the ones who were lost, though they looked like they were the better ones, you know. And I love that. But I also wanted to ask you to say, after you gave birth, because you say you then went back and you started doing it, how did that process go?
So after giving birth, so it's like my mom, I have to credit my mom, because my sister and I always called my mom the beast, because she used to, like, my mom never, not even one day called off sick at work. She was so serious about her responsibilities. And she would never complain, could say, oh, I have a headache, or oh, I have this. No, she would take care of her business. And so for me, after I had my daughter, I just knew that I had to take care of business, because now I had a child that I needed to feed. And there was no, it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my child as well. And, I had gotten married because at that time, I thought the way to fix this situation is to get married, and I'm sure my husband at the time also thought the same thing, because, he came from a very strict Adventist family as well. And so it was, okay, now we made this mistake. Now we need to fix it for everybody else. We need to get married, even though we did not even know what true love was. And we did not even know what, building a relationship and a family with somebody else entailed, because this was just a mistake, that a one-time mistake that had happened. And so it's like, so now you're getting these two people married who basically have no business marrying each other. And it's like, I thought for sure this is going to, at least now, it's going to reinstitute my parents in that good grace with the world, considering how much my dad is known. So it was like, okay, so at least now, that was my, when I was 18.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. And that's the reality, right?
Yeah, because I was like, okay, and now I'm married, and I'm sure it was the same for him too. Okay, we just fix the problem that we have. We fix this situation by getting married, which was not the answer to the solution to the problem, But anyway, we ended up in this marriage that we had no business being in. And so it was a very tumultuous relationship. It was rough. And I ended up being a mom of two in this marriage, and we're married for 5 years. And then we divorced. By the time I was 23, I was a divorced single mom of 2 kids. So here I am with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I still had these big dreams of becoming a doctor. So when I when I got pregnant, I switched majors from pre-med to nursing, because pre-med was not going to pay the bills and I needed a job. So
gotta make the money.
I gotta make the money. I gotta take care of my kids. I have mouths to feed. So, I went to nursing school, and so I was working full-time as a nurse. And then I actually worked full-time as a nurse for 3 years. And then in that time, I finished all my prereqs and took the MCAT, and then went to medical school. So just to say that, that was, it's like you have a mistake, you've made a mistake, and then you try to fix the mistake your own way without God, without even consulting God. You try to fix it your own way, and then you end up in an even deeper hole. And then now you're out of this hole, but then you're so broken and tattered, and just so, it's a mess. It's like just ashes, a whole heap of nothingness and ashes. But then it's like, you see me outside, do not, Inga she's got it together. Because I'm still getting up, I'm still washing my face, and I'm still going about my business. But on the inside, there was a lot of healing to be done. But at that time, it's now I'm 23. And then shortly after, I went to medical school. And then I met my ex-husband there. And, you know, it's like, yeah, in this situation where you haven't healed yourself. So guess what? You're going to attract people also have their own issues who are broken.
Yeah.
Right?
Bleeding on the wrong people. Yeah.
And it's like, it's hard for us because we grow up in the church. And initially you're like, okay, so before you're thinking, okay, God is never going to bless me now. I mean, I've made a mess of everything. And then this hunk comes along and he's like so in love with you. And you're like, oh, well, maybe God is going to bless me. But again, you don't really consult with God. You don't even take the time to heal yourself. And then you end up in this other relationship that you still have no business being in. Yeah. So then I was with my husband for 10 years, but ended up divorced. That's when it was like a light went off and it was like, oh my gosh, okay, I really need to get my life together. I need to really just start consulting God and start having a true relationship with God, because I feel like sometimes because we grow up in the church and it's like sort of given to us, we don't really get into that phase where we truly learn to depend and rely on God for ourselves. For me, I always had my mom praying for me. So I always knew I was covered in prayer.
I know the feeling. I used to send my prayer request to my mom and just automatically think, you know what? Since she's praying for it, it's sorted.
It's sorted. And I always knew it was sorted because I knew whatever problem I had, she would be on it. She would be praying for me and I would be just fine. And I would always turn out fine. But this experience actually forced me to look deep within myself and say, who am I? And who am I in Christ? And what is my personal relationship with God? You know? And I feel like our relationship with God, and he is like, other than ourselves, he is like constant, that we have that relationship with, that changes. It's like seasons. There are times when your relationship with him, you're having this torrid affair with Jesus, and it's just so beautiful. And then there are times when it's like you are in a dry season, and you know what you need to do. You know, it's like, yes. And then it's like you go through these phases where you're like, I trust you, Lord. I trust you, Lord. But do you really? Like, if you know, I had to get to a point. I know I'm digressing, but I had to get to a point of total true surrender, where I can say, Lord, order my steps. From the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep, I want you to order my steps. Where you can say, Lord, I don't care what it is, because I know you're not going to do me harm. I know that whatever it is, you will take care of. I know you're going to sort it all out. I need to just make sure that I'm living in your will, because in your will is the safest place for me. Whatever issues, whatever could be bothering, whatever is happening with my kids, whatever is happening with my family, whatever is happening with my career, whatever is happening with my school if I'm in school, whatever is happening with my finances, that's not my problem, because you said you take care of everything. And I know with you, all things are possible. So that how you take care of it is none of my damn business.
But you're going to take care of it. I want to ask you something. I want to ask you something. You talked about how you needed to actually go through the healing. What type of healing did you need to go through? Maybe help someone else who's going through that, because I had a friend recently who was in an abusive relationship where her eyes were like swollen like this, to say he's actually beating you up, and you're thinking, she gets so caught up in the idea of Mrs. So and so pleasing your parents, but at the expense of her life. So can you encourage someone who's in such a situation where you're holding on to the wrong things, and the healing that you had to reflect on yourself to say, this actually hurts me, and I'm trying to look for healing in this next person because I don't have it in myself?
Yes, so that's huge, because I do hear from people who, message me and tell me, thank you for sharing your story, because I feel so alone in this. And it's a very, very lonely place. I can tell you that. When I went through that difficult time, I would hear people say all the time, oh, that's time they'll grow up and then zvichaita iwe chingoshingirira. And it's like, I'm like, no, no, I can't shingirira, and it's one of those things. It's so hard. That's why I always tell women that you have to be in a place where you can take care of yourself and your kids, because you don't want to ever be in a position where you are dependent on somebody that you can't leave when your life is in danger, when your livelihood is in danger, because I can't imagine leaving my kids. So I have to be in a position where I can be able to take care of my kids, because it's all about, when you become a mom, it's all about your children. We can talk all about your individualism and what have you, but the honest truth is, it's all about your kids.
That's true.
Like you can have your own life, you can have your own career, you can have this, but bottom line, I know everything I do is driven by my children. Like, what do my kids need? Because there is to me, it's like that love. It's kind of like, how God's love is for us. The way I relate to God's love is how my love is for my children. And I feel like if I, a human who is so full of sin and imperfection, can love my kids so much and not want any harm to happen to my kids, how much more does my Father love me, And so it's like, it's very difficult, because a lot of times, not only is it dangerous sometimes to leave, but a lot of times women don't have the resources.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, people want to look at the history. It's a very emotional and psychological thing. People want to look at the history and say, but we've already been together 10 years. But 15 years. But Kovana. And I hear women saying all the time, I'm staying for my kids. No, you're not staying for your kids. Because do you want your kids to grow up thinking it's okay to treat a woman that way, or for your kids to grow up thinking it's okay to be treated that way by a man? So, but I understand that, everybody's situation is different, and it makes it very difficult, but you need to be able to stand on your own 2 feet.
Yeah.
That way you can live with your kids, and you can take care of your kids, and you can still be okay.
True.
Because
and I love
times it's the financial aspect that prevents people from moving on.
True. That is so true. And I love the fact that you're also saying it's a process, to say, yes, you might want to live, but you also need to look at several factors. I worked for an NGO in Zimbabwe for abused women when I started out my career. And it used to really break my heart to see someone come and go to a safe house. 2 months later, you're thinking, okay, this person is done, she's out, and you find she goes back. And in asking them why, that financial aspect always came up, to say, there's nothing to me. And sometimes, like you said, psychologically, they had been told, you are nothing without me. So even psychologically, people don't talk about how you've been affected, to say you actually start thinking, I can't survive without this person. So I like the part that you talked about, also making sure you get the healing that you need psychologically, because it plays a great role. You talked about knowing who you are in God. It starts from there. I think we give people so much power, to let a human define who you are. Like, sometimes I'm like, girl, you need to get up. I wish he's saw what I saw in you. But it's also a process where if you have never really known your value, you're always going to be looking for it in the wrong places.
Absolutely. And I think that's the biggest thing, because what I've noticed is that what happens in abusive relationships is that the abuser makes the victim think that they are nothing without them, number one. Number two, the victim's self-esteem ends up being at negative 0.000, you know?
Yeah.
So you have no self-esteem at all, not even low, but like no self-esteem at all. And you have no self-value. So you have no self-worth. So it does make it hard. That's why I always applaud women who are able to get out of that situation, because they are starting from zero. They are getting themselves out of these situations when they are at zero and have nothing, you know? So it's like, to be able to have the strength to say, you know what, I can stand on my own. I can do this. It's hard, especially when you've been hearing time and again that you are worthless. Nobody's ever gonna want you. And you're like, but who cares if nobody's ever gonna want me? I am happy and full as I am, you know? And it's like understanding that and getting our, sorry, I'm like, what is that? That's what I get for leaving the door open. So understanding your worth and understanding, especially when you know who you are in Christ, that alone will help you in, and now I'm talking to your younger girls, you know, it's like when you know who you are in Christ and you understand your self-worth, then you will not end up in those situations. I can tell you that the root of all my problems was low self-esteem, low self-worth, not really understanding my value in Christ. And I feel like somehow our culture perpetuates all those things, you know? It's like you get pregnant out of wedlock, damages, what damage. Now it's like you have this thinking, oh, I'm damaged goods. And who came up with all this thing about damaged goods anyway? And so all these men who think I'm damaged goods, you know? And you're putting value in kutijoni kurorwa gives you more status and more value than anything else, you know? It's more like in our culture, it seems like kurorwa apa and then wakazoito degree nani. But based on what?
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Hey, and that I'd actually want you to encourage people who think validation or marriage is an achievement. I'd love you to share with us that aspect, because like you said, I was even laughing to say, and you're just thinking, I'm gonna grow up and I'm gonna have my man, you know, and our journey is not the same, and sometimes we do it at the expense of losing ourselves. And I want you to encourage a few young people who are probably about to make the wrong decision, because sometimes you can tell my person is not the right one to marry, but you're like, I'm at that age, I don't have anything going for me. How would you encourage them?
I will tell them, Kuti girl, you have so much life ahead of you. Do not put your life on hold for a man or for marriage. Yes, you might be getting pressure from family saying, no, you be you. You have to know who you are before you even get into a marriage. And you want your marriage to be one everlasting. Trust me, I know. I've been divorced twice, so I know.
I know what I'm talking about.
I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm just so glad because, you know, God blessed me with a wonderful husband who is like just amazing. But I'll tell you that I had gotten to a point where I had matured. I had grown. I had healed all those hurts, all those, and I came in whole, you know? And I wasn't even looking for marriage. It's like when it's the right person, it's the right person. But I can tell you, for those young girls, don't look at marriage as the prize, like you have to be married. You can do so much as a single woman. You can achieve your dreams. You can travel. You can do anything you want to do. If a wonderful guy comes along, make sure that he meets the standards. Don't settle just so you can. No. Don't settle. Because you can live such a fulfilled life and do so much with your life. Because at the end of the day, when you are standing before our maker, he's not going to say, Kutijweni, so you know, no, he's going to say, what have you done with the gifts that I gave you? That is what is important in our life, you know? What have you done with the gifts that I gave you? Because a lot of times we are given so many gifts and we are too afraid to even use those gifts and talents or to even do anything with them. Because one, we are afraid of failure. Two, we are afraid of kuti vanhu vanozotichi ndakafoira kana ndakatadza kana kuti just vanhu vanozotichi, that validation yatinoda kubva kune vanhu, you know. And three, it's like sometimes tine usimbe. And we need to really look at that. We really need to look at that and see kuti zvoni, even if it means sometimes you sit down and you write down kuti, if nasi ndakafa pandinozono onana na Jesu, when he says kuti zvoni, okay, is he really going to say good and faithful servant? Kuti wakaita everything that you're supposed to do? Or are there a lot of things that you see that you could be doing that you're not doing?
Wow, that is deep. To actually say we need to look at it from that point. And I think ever since doing that, my life has been different. I've even been able to remove the wrong people. I've stopped being apologetic. You know, sometimes you get in a certain space and you're like, do you mind if I talk about God? Now I'm just like, you know what, take it or leave it. This is me. I'm only here because of his grace. Like, had it not been for him, I don't know who I would be, because we all make mistakes in life. But it's also knowing that constantly is always looking out to say, whenever you want, come back to me. Like the story of the prodigal son, who knew even after he messed up, you know what, my father is there. And when he got there, he was dressed in the best robe. He didn't say, Sha, you're smelling, like, hold up there, let them bath you, then you can come to me. He went running for him. And I think that is what is important. We need to value ourselves. Once we love ourselves, so many other layers. We'll start coming off and stop going for the wrong career. And there's something you mentioned about working hard. I think people can be lazy. They want to try once, twice, and it doesn't happen. And you be like, I'm done. When you actually share your story, you say there are days you had to find a babysitter so that you can go to school the whole day. You know, like we need to be willing to make those sacrifices to grow. You know, you don't grow in your comfort zone.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, because sometimes we are so lazy sometimes, you know. And it's like, the habits that we form now, and the habits, the daily habits that we have, is what's going to determine what your life is going to be in 5 and 10 years from now. I can tell you, when I was just sitting around eating my cheesecakes and doing all this, all that has caught up with me.
It's catching up with you now.
So it's like you wake up, I do believe in, like, for you young ones, and you know, even for those who are older, it's never too late to change. I can tell you that a morning routine is critical. You have to have a solid morning routine. And I can tell you, for me, I know that when I spend time with God, he multiplies that and gives it back to me. And I can do so much. You will never hear me complaining, oh, I wish I had more hours in the day after I have spent time with God. It's when I don't spend my time that I'm supposed to spend with God that I'm like, oh, where did the time go? I need more hours in the day. So God doesn't look at time the way we look at time. And that's why a lot of times we're so impatient and we just want it now. But he looks at time in his own way because he's the creator of time. And so I'm like, if I can get up and give him an hour of my day, considering I have 23 other hours to do all sorts of other things, we can spend hours on Netflix. So why can't you just give an hour of your day to him? And you know what? He multiplies that time. And if you do that first thing in the morning and say, Lord, order my steps. This is what I want. I want to do what you want me to do. I'm now at that phase in life where, you know, I spend more time reading his word and less time praying. Because before I used to always be in prayer, you know, like praying was more, reading was less. But then it's like when I read, I am actually sitting and communing with him. I'm like just having a conversation with him as I'm reading his word. You know,
true.
I might stop and pray and continue reading. And I might stop again and pray about something else and continue reading. And you know, it's like just spending that time, that quality time with God. So it just makes the world of a difference. And so it's like, do that, do your workout, even if it's 15 minutes, it doesn't have to be anything elaborate. And then you can start your day. And you will see how much of a difference your life will. And for those young people, watch less TV. Because I see sitting in front of the TV day in, day out. Don't you have other things to do? You do. We all do.
Make the best of your time. That is so true. Thank you so much for that. I think there is so much I would love to share with you. We didn't even get to finish half of the things I wanted you to talk about. So if it's okay with you, I will definitely be calling you back because I want you to also share on the foundation you started, and so that you can encourage even other young people that, you know, if God has given you gifts, like you said, you're not stopping. You are working. You are helping so many people out there, and you shared a lot of wise words, and really want to thank you for that. I know you're very busy, but I think that's one of the things I love. I know it's one of the things I love about you. You are so humble, like on so many levels. I'm like, God knows who he gives certain things to. If it was me, hey.
Thank you.
But you are so humble, and I love that about you. Like, I learned so much from you. I was watching one of your Instagram stories when you're doing a transplant, and I think you were in Africa or something, and I was like, does she ever rest? How does she do it? But you mentioned that God just gives you strength. And he says, if you are faithful with little, I will give you more. And I think your life is showing us that in everything that you've been through, the lessons you've learned, you haven't tried to be perfect. You've shared your story with us to also know there's hope for all of us. I remember reading it at a time where I was like to myself, God, I don't really want to do what you're calling me to do. And he kept sending a message to say, delayed obedience is disobedience. And coming across your story encouraged me to say, our journey is different, but God is taking us through. Like, there are lessons that come along the way, but you need to be willing to trust him to get you there. So thank you so much. I don't know if you have any final words before we close.
Well, thank you so much. I think, let me tell you guys a little bit about my foundation, actually, how it all started. So it's like, I knew I needed to start a foundation, but I didn't know what it was about. But, you know, it's like sometimes you just feel like God is telling you, you need to do this, you need to do this. And I always have a heart of service. So that was like a no-brainer. So I started it, and then I was like, Lord, I have registered the foundation. Now what do you want me to do with it? And, you know, I was praying about this every single day for almost a year. And I was not hearing from God. It was just sitting there. Until one day he said, this is the person you need to partner with, and you need to do this and this and this for your foundation. Like, it was as clear as day. And you know, I was just like so shocked because it was probably like 11 months later.
Wow.
Because it was just sitting. And
God's
then it's like when God's timing, and when the timing was right, everything just happened so smoothly, you know?
Wow.
So obviously it's a lot of work. And for us, you know, it's hard to ask for money from people, but it's that you cannot do on your own. You have to have people help you. So I am learning a lot through the process. And it's basically the whole work of the foundation is to serve and empower and elevate the rural girl child. You know, you guys know how much I like just adored my mom. And my mom was a rural girl child who like came out of poverty and basically, you know, studied her way to get her ZJCs, studied her way to write her O-levels. And she was so bright. But I cannot even imagine how far she would have gone if she had the opportunities, you know? And so I look at these girls and I say, I want to be able to provide opportunities for these rural girls in Zimbabwe. So that they don't think all they have is to just get married. Not that there's anything wrong with getting married, but that's not the end all be all, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's I just wanted to share that about my foundation.
It's funny that you said that. And when you talked about your mom, I feel the same way about my grandmother. She's actually got the same name as me. And I always say, if you had grown up in my time, you'd be a professor. But she's also taught me that it's because of what she had to give, even in her situation, that I am who I am today, because she passed it on to my dad, and then we get to spend some time with her. And she's got this thing where she says, like, when you go visit her in the village, every person who passes by the road, she'll be like, where are you? You know, like, she doesn't get tired of helping and praying. And I never knew I had it in me. And then you say to yourself, can I tell you a crazy story? I came across a book called The Anna Anointing, and I was looking at it and I was like,
oh yes, I read that book.
You read it? Yeah. It came at the right time when I was also saying to God, what would you want me to do? And it came as clear as day, as you were saying to say. He said to me, the name, have you ever looked at what your name means? And I want you, because it says Anna was in the temple telling people about the redemption that comes through God. Like, I'm crazy about evangelizing. And it's like, God was like, that's it. You know, so all these things that you're saying, like, people in the rural areas have so much knowledge, and sometimes they just don't have the opportunity to use their gifts. So I really love what you're doing. And honestly, I think you need to come back and share more, because there are so many people who would love to know how to give back, like what they can also do.
I will definitely come back. Since I ended up digressing from all the stuff you wanted me to talk about, we wanted to pack everything in this short time, so we definitely come back.
Yeah, that's the whole idea of Candid Convos. We don't want it to be unscripted, so you say what's in your heart. And I always believe God has a way of sending a message out there for the right person. Half the time, even when I go preach, I have my notes, but he'll be like, no, it's not supposed to go that way. I want it to go a certain way for someone who needs to hear this. So thank you so much. Me and you can talk for so long. This is why I'm like, I love your energy.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for watching. We'll definitely have her back. And if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'll also share Dr. Pray's YouTube channel, Health and Wellness, that she's doing, and her podcast. And all the things that she's doing, I'll just share below, and you can click and find out more. So thank you, everyone, and bye.